the new decade begins, Americans may have reason to feel less hopeful than they were at the turn of the century, and this is not just because of a food scare. We want to take a look back at the last 10 years, look forward to what is next, the issues likely to dominate in 2010. Here to help us do all that, all CNN contributors, Errol Louis, New York Daily News columnist, MIguel Perez, syndicated columnist and professor at Lehman College, and Robert Zimmerman, Democratic strategist. Good to have all of you with us. I know you're all excited for your dinner after this, as we were talking about while watching this. As we look ahead, though, to 2010, we took a little bit of a look back earlier in the show at the year in politics. Some of the big issues have really come up just in the past week. The big issues for the president, the war on terror, terrorism, going to be huge in 2010. We saw that with, of course, the Christmas Day bombing. Looking back now, the incomplete implementation of all these recommendations from the 9/11 Commission, AFPAC, as we call Afghanistan and Pakistan, and even today, as we're learning about the dropping of charges from 2007 for some of the Blackwater contractors there and the fallout that that's going to have. I'm going to start with you, MIguel. What is the fallout from all of these issues as it relates to the U.S.'s security concerns?
Well, you know, I guess most of us, the American people, tend to want to forget. We want this whole thing to go away. We want terrorism to go away. We want the wars to go away. And we want to put it all behind us. But we're in denial because we are a nation at war. And national security is a problem. It's going to be a huge problem for us in the future. And this is a war in which civilians are the target. So obviously, we all have to be aware of this. And, you know, we have a new administration in Washington, and we want to leave that whole threat of terrorism behind with the Bush administration. Hello, we're realizing now that it's here to stay. And in the last week, as you said, all these new reminders.
And interesting, Robert, you were shaking your head in agreement at Blackwater, at these revelations that have come in today that we talked about earlier in the show. How does that affect the U.S. overseas, not just in Iraq, but Afghanistan, Pakistan, now Yemen, where clearly the U.S. is not liked, but we've learned that we are actually working pretty closely with the government there. How does that affect efforts there?
Well, I think it's important, if you look at the decision that was handed down by the federal judge, a 90-page decision, his ruling was to throw the case out because the civil rights and civil liberties of the Blackwater defendants were not protected. So that's really a lesson to the world about the rule of law in America. Obviously, the Iraqi people feel a great sense of frustration, feel that justice wasn't done.
Right.
But it's an important lesson to the world about the American system of justice. And it's particularly...
But the local population isn't going to read a 90-page finding.
No, there's no question about that. But the governments of the world have to understand we are a government of laws, not of individuals, not of dictators. And that's a very important juxtaposition towards the 7 heroic, patriotic CIA officials who died in that terrorist attack yesterday. And it's an important reminder that while we're facing enemies who don't follow the rule of law, don't follow rules, we still are a nation that rises above that.
When you look, Errol, when you look down the line at 2010, obviously terrorism is going to continue to be a big issue, as we've been reminded about, but there are jobs at stake. There's the healthcare debate. There are midterm elections. What's the headline that you see jumping out at you as we launch into this new year?
A distrustful nation tries to restore accountability. That, to me, would be the headline. Because what I see happening is this last decade was an age of deception and distrust, where people found one leader and institution after another had lied to them, whether you're talking about faked intelligence that led to the Iraq War, or you're talking about the enormous hyping that led to the housing bubble, or the stock swindlers of major proportions, or the corporations that betrayed their shareholders.
Or the election that was stolen in 2000. Let's not forget that either in terms of undercutting our confidence in the system.
And you even have the pop culture figures like a Tiger Woods, you know? I mean, it continues and it continues. And what I see out there is a lot of unfocused anger and anxiety. And the election is where you start to focus it. And some people in Congress are going to take hits for things that they kind of had nothing to do with.
You know, it's a very important point Errol's bringing up, because the same anger towards incumbents, the same anger towards the establishment that brought Democrats to power in 2006 in Congress and the presidency in 2008 still exists now. And the real challenge for the Democratic president and for the Democratic Congress and for the Obama administration is to try to move from hope into pragmatic achievement.
Well, there's also, it's interesting you bring that up, because we talked about this poll right off the top before we came to our segment. The CNN Opinion Research Corporation had a poll out today. What the new year holds for the world. 51% of respondents say they're hopeful for the world, 69% hopeful for themselves, 48% are fearful. And when you look at those numbers, we're really talking it's split here. And a decade ago, 68% of respondents on the cusp of the year 2000 said they were hopeful for the world. When you look at this, part of that, I would imagine, stems from not just the economy, but how bitter and partisan this country has become. How do you overcome that?
Well, you know, like the world is very scary as it is right now, and it has become scarier in the last decade. You know, when the Cold War was over, or we thought was over, except for us Cuban Americans, but when the Cold War was over, right, that's another segment, but when the Cold War was over, we thought we were going to enjoy this period of peace that was going to be everlasting. Oh, hello, again, it's not there, and now we're, I think we're in World War III against, except we refuse to call it that. We're in an international war against Islamic terrorists.
But we're also in a domestic war against ourselves, it seems. I mean, in this country, it has become so bitter, so partisan, and not just when it comes to politics. I mean, on a daily level among people. Is that something that we can overcome?
Is it more partisan than it was during the Great Depression, which, of course, spread enormous panic throughout our nation and destroyed our credibility in our institutions? Is the world scarier than it was during World War II when we faced the threat of Nazi imperialism, Nazi dictatorships, and Japanese imperialism? I think what really is important to remember as we begin the new year is we are the most transparent society in the world. We are a nation that has faced even greater obstacles, as difficult as the time is right now. And our greatest resource is our people and our system of governance. We shouldn't lose sight of that.
But the main difference between now and then was that people trusted the government. They trusted the courts. You didn't have this kind of core assumption among a lot of people that all of the institutions are illegitimate.
You had a major communist movement, though, in the 30s. You had a major movement towards socialism during that time period. There really was a panic in the streets in many respects.
But listen,
we rallied as a nation.
Those were conventional wars. This is a different kind of war now, and again, the target are civilians all over the world. It makes a hell of a difference.
You know something? Every war in retrospect is a conventional war. At the time, it was an unprecedented war for us to face. And I just think...
But this one, I'm going to have to cut you off only because we are in the middle of it right now. But good to have all of you with us. And, you know, the upside to all of this is that there's plenty to talk about as the year moves forward with all of you.
Plenty to look forward to as well.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to all of you. Great to have you with us tonight. Thanks for coming in on New Year's Day. Still ahead, a Navy corpsman's bravery leaves his...